All right, ladies and gents, it's the last day of the retreat, and we've been at it for a week almost. So all kinds of practices. Stomping has been lovely, really lovely, and everything. And so it's pension time on this retreat, like heavy lifting, heavy lifting, and after heavy lifting, you relax, and you're able to relax. You're able to, because of that heavy lifting, all that preparation, you can just rest, just be. And I think that we will use most of these sessions left for that purpose. Just a moment. So let's enjoy the pension. Let's enjoy pension. In Dharma practice, in yoga practice, we take refuge in the Buddha. And we take refuge in a number of other things. Guru, Pure Land, Dharma, and Sangha also. But also in the Buddha. One way to interpret that, taking refuge in the Buddha, is taking refuge, putting trust in our own Buddha nature. Are you now sitting in a way after these days of training that it gives back, that this Buddha nature, Buddha within, gives you safety and relief? Does it give you relief? Don't just nod if you don't feel that way. Nod only if it is really so. And now I see fewer nods. God damn it. Haha, really funny. But yeah, this refuge, it's serious business. It really needs to be a lived experience. It needs to be real. It needs to be real. Otherwise, it's as much nonsense as everything else. Otherwise, it's as much samsaric as everything else. So, practically speaking, if to some of you it is still, you can't just rest and abide in this lovely clarity, soft and grounded energy of the basic state, use the tools. Relax, relax again. Generate bodhicitta, generate it again. Even spin guru mantras. Pick the guru by the sleeve. Need some hand. Please help me out. So if I'm sure though that if you're now at the moment, this moment, can't just bathe in this lovely clarity and subtle bliss, I'm sure there has been moments during this retreat. We've done these lovely dynamic practices. This was really the first time that we were able to do stomping properly because I came up with the idea of stomping during the COVID lockdowns, and that's why we haven't been able to do that as a group before this retreat. I think we did a little bit on last November retreat weekend in Finland, but not as much as here. So we've done it over a week, and you have felt that it has tremendous effect and helps instantly with recognition. Something that I also really love about stomping is that, I'm kind of a fan of shamanism and the history of shamanism. And, I've often thought about the way how people in our time live. I've thought about what communities mean and what sanghas mean. And I've also thought about communities of the past, like tribal communities and so on, that still, of course, exist in some corners of the world. And I like the idea of dancing around fire, singing and dancing. Doing that, I don't know how often tribes do that. Maybe not every night, but at least once a week or something. Or maybe they do it when somebody feels like doing it. And so, dancing around fire, singing, clapping hands, putting that energy there together. Of course, in tribes and in shamanism, this energy has been used for different purposes. That some might be questionable from the point of view of Dharma, like, for example, wanting to win the neighboring tribe in the battle the next day. Definitely questionable from the point of view of non-harming. But also, I'm sure they've done like we've done it, also as a practice, also as a way to uncover and discover the basic state and all of its gifts, but also just to make the moment of life that we are living now of higher quality, that of joy and enjoyment. And this, of course, is the spirit of Tantra. Tantra is not mantric yoga, tantric yoga. It's not dull and boring. At least it shouldn't be. Oh, that's a good one. It shouldn't be. I think that, we should definitely be able to enjoy as much and as often as possible our practices, whether in sitting form or in any other form. But if it is a grind from one day to the next, you have to be an idiot to keep doing that kind of practice. Did you get that? So, if you're doing something that doesn't feel good, you have to be dumb to be doing it. That's my view. But if it feels good, if it not only clarifies your mind, removes your existential problems, but also makes you feel good and alive and joyful, you want to do it again and again and again and again. This is simple logic. And I think that, I could speak about this extensively based on my observation about my students who've finished emptiness practice. Something that I've thought a lot throughout the years is that, I was really fortunate to train in a Japanese Zen temple and lived in Japan for a while. And I've also been around Asia in few countries, staying in different ashrams and seeing all kinds of practitioners doing all kinds of things publicly, doing their Dharma practice, yoga practice, spiritual practice publicly in some way or form. I remember the very first week that I went to the temple in Japan. On the first weekend, it was late summer, there was some kind of city festival on the weekend. And then the Sangha of the monastery where I was had been invited, including the master, including the Roshi, had been invited to, I remember it was next to a river, and it was some occasion like a like we were invited there to chant Buddhist prayers and sutras to give a blessing for the city or something like this. I don't remember the exact reason why we were there. But I remember the whole sangha of 30 people standing on this bank of a river, few thousand people surrounding us. And it wasn't like a performance where we were performing and they were observing, but like, well, everybody, of course, there was microphones in front of us. So everybody heard us. Everybody heard us chanting the Heart Sutra and Avalokitesvara prayers and so on. And I think that was the first experience for me to be a practitioner and do practice on display in front of the people of the local community. And we chanted those sutras I remember it was a hot summer evening, and we chanted maybe hour and a half. And I loved it. I really loved it. Chanting there in the middle of a huge crowd. And then, so I'm talking about practicing on display as a yogi, as a meditator, as a spiritual person, doing practices publicly. And then in the monastery in Japan, what is traditional, it's part of the training, is that there is something called takuhatsu, which is done every 4 or 5 days, where everybody puts on the monk's robes and the hat. There's this big straw hat. There are pictures of myself also wearing monk's robes. And so the monastic community, the Sangha, walks out the gate in a single line, walks out the gate of the monastery, and we start. Maybe we take a bus to the other part of the city, or maybe we remain in the part of the city where the monastery was. And we walk on the streets yelling this. Ho! Ho means Dharma in Japanese. So it's 30 people chanting Dharma, Dharma, Dharma in the streets. And everybody can choose their tone and rhythm and so on. And one of the reasons why it's done is to let people know that the monks and the practitioners are here, so they can come and donate money, or back in the old days, donate food. They usually don't donate food anymore. They just bring the food to the monastery if they want to donate food to the monastery, but money they give. But this giving of money is only one thing that takuhatsu is for. This walking around the streets is for. And when they give the monks money, we are carrying like a bag around our neck that is hanging here in front of the body. And then you open the front of the bag and bow in front of the person who wants to give you money, and then the money slips right into the bag, and then you chant a short prayer for that person. And usually people, they put their hands like this and they bow their head a little bit as you chant the sutra for them. And it's usually the older people who know about this custom and who still have the wits to appreciate it. Young people, I don't remember. Maybe also some young people donated to me, but usually older people. So this is doing this. We did this in the monastery every 4 or 5 days. And then there were the occasional events of like that summer evening, going to some place in town and chanting sutras. So the point is that in the city of Okayama, where the monastery of Sogenji is, where I was, the locals, they see monks. They see Buddhist practitioners there on the streets, on the train station. Often, if you go to Japan and you go to any train station or subway station, there might be a monk standing on the front entrance or next to it, just silently or chanting sutras. So there's quite a bit of Dharma on display there. People see it. Even if they don't pay attention, they know that they passed a monk. I was sending yesterday a message to my old friend from the monastery, Kori, who's still a Zen practitioner and nowadays a teacher himself. I sent him a message whether anybody, we have hundreds of Zen communities and many Zen centers offering residential training, like monastic training, temple training. We have many of them outside Asia today, right? So, Zen Buddhism started to be transported to Western countries in 60s. And then by the 80s, there were already so many Zen groups all over the world. And then now, the Zen community has grown even further, and there are hundreds groups and loads of centers. But to my knowledge, not single one of them does takuhatsu. Not single one of them puts Dharma on display. And I've been really shocked by this throughout the years, because I remember 10 years ago or so, I was discussing to a few Zen teachers, some of who I know personally, and then some other people who knows the Western Zen world inside out. And they confirmed me that no, there's not a single community that does this. They simply didn't bring that from China or Japan or whichever type of Zen tradition they have. And I remember the very first Zen group that I started practicing in Finland and Sweden. They still have a center in Sweden. I remember that lineage was brought from Japan to, I think, upstate New York, where they have the main center. And then my first Zen teachers studied in US, Swedish couple. And I remember that, like in the 70s or 80s, they tried to do takuhatsu, wearing these oriental monks and nuns robes and hats and everything, with the aim of giving people the opportunity to donate money for the Dharma. But of course, Westerners didn't, they didn't know who the heck these people were in these strange clothes, and why should we give money to them? So what happened was that, with the way I remember the story that it was told to me many years ago, is that they stopped doing it because people didn't give them money. And then, they realized that people aren't giving them money, so they tried to make some kind of an ecological adaptation of takuhatsu, and the Sangha started going on the streets of some cities in New York State, where they started picking up trash from the streets, like cleaning the streets. I don't understand like how, why, but that's what they did. as I remember the story. Anyway, my point is that for some weird reason, this tradition of Takuhatsu in Zen Buddhism, Korean Son Buddhism, Chinese Chan Buddhism, it wasn't brought to the West at all. Literally, nobody's doing it. Corey confirmed this yesterday, that according to his knowledge, nobody's doing it. And I'm just using my experience as an example of what I think is a major problem in the West, that Dharma is not on display. I think this is a big, big problem. Earlier on this retreat, I was telling you how, and I'm sure you have the same experience when you leave your home, your own pure land. When you go out the door, just like myself and Kaisa do, where we live, and we see the people who, our neighbors, and people who live in the same area, you see samsara all over their face, in their posture. In everything you see samsara. I'm sure you see this yourself every day. So there's somebody at the door. So how about the story of Shakyamuni that I was telling on the previous days? So to remind you, the story of Shakyamuni was that for the first 25 years, he lived a very secured, but also limited life in the temple of his father, the king, and only had good things, young friends, and worldly pleasures. And then he started, for some reason, started to think what's outside the walls of the palace, and then got out from the palace to see a corpse of a dead person, an old human being, and an severely ill human being. And he was very shocked about this. He must have finished, after his very guarded life in the temple, he must have finished the preliminaries in 2 or 3 days when he learned about death, old age, and illness. That's a joke, that he must have finished the preliminaries in a couple of days. So anyway, the fourth thing he saw was the yogi who was on display. And that moment changed the direction of Shakyamuni's life, changed the direction of billions of people during the past 2,500 years. That one moment, that one yogi on display. Or yogini. Nowadays, the world is very different than it was 2,000 or 2,500 years ago. We have internet, we have magazines, we have a lot more resources than ever in human history. But I think it's still this matter of Dharma not being on display is unaddressed mostly. Unaddressed mostly. So I've often thought through the years that what could be, how much benefit it would be if practitioners of any type of sitting meditation would sometimes go and sit on the side of a marketplace, somewhere on the streets of the city, instead of always sitting in the meditation room at home or always sitting in the Sangha's private practice space where nobody literally sees you, where no outsiders ever see you. I think this is a question of bodhicitta and how bodhicitta is understood or not understood. And not everything sums up to emptiness. Not everything boils down to emptiness. There is more to Dharma than just emptiness realization. Right? You know, there are all these activities as opposed to being inactive. I was briefly mentioning somebody I heard like a Buddhist, maybe it was a discussion on a Buddhist internet forum years ago when there was a discussion about the mission work in Christianity. And there were people saying that, that's ridiculous, like such a thing doesn't happen in Buddhism. It's the dumbest thing ever. Like how great of a dissonance do you need to have to not see that Buddhism has been about mission work the whole time? The whole time. Very strong element of trying to get the message, trying to get the solution to our universal existential problem on the reach of everybody. And again, of course, there are secondary motivations, sometimes ill motivations behind this. But what we can do is to be certain and secure that our own motivations, that our own heart is in the right place. We can't change the minds and hearts of others. If they want to do bad things and take advantage of people and so on, not much we can do about it. So it's been lovely to see people trying bindis on this retreat. And I've spent a number of years, many years actually, I guess I could speak of decade, contemplating which external marks to use in our Sangha. To me, it never was an option not having external marks at all, because that would make us as hidden, as secret as everybody else. And in my view, this is a big problem. Only the chosen few who, how people hear about Dharma, practice, meditation, Buddhism, whatever, in whatever form, through their friends, somehow through good fortune, or perhaps because of ripening of karma. But most people never hear about anything. So this is why I think it will be not only extremely beneficial, but meritorious to us practitioners to go and show, be on display. So I've thought about external marks for years, and we have tested different external marks. And then last year at some point, I started thinking about this bindi, this little dot in the forehead, which nowadays mostly people associate with Hinduism. Nowadays, the influence of recent history, recent 500 years, 1,000 years, recent history makes us, I guess, in most people's minds, makes it associated with Hinduism. But if you do a simple Google search, or if you have Buddha statues or paintings at home, take a look at their foreheads. This Guru Rinpoche statue has a bindi because I put it on him. But there was like a spiral there, but I put a bindi. So I sabotaged this situation. But my point is that if you do that Google search, or if you have Shakyamuni statue, or many other deities or different Buddhas at home, what the heck? It's a Buddhist thing and they have bindis. So I think what happened is that in general, the spirit of Dharma back in the so-called Mahasiddha era, there was a time period of the so-called Mahasiddha era, when there were many Mahasiddhas. Well, many, yeah, relatively many. And the culture back then, from Jesus's time, around 2,000 years ago, up until 13th century, 1200s, the culture was very different than it is now. So, it was common back then that, Buddhism wasn't as established as it is now. Now it's all established and kind of calcified into the systems. But back then it wasn't. And there was, during those times, Buddhist Tantra was being developed. So there was the emptiness philosophy, emptiness view, and then they started applying Hindu deities to that view. And there were many other developments, but just giving an outline. And in those days, folks had bindis, regardless how they viewed themselves. Of course, nowadays it's like a, it's a, well, I guess it always was an identity question, but it often seems to me that there is too, like the wrong kind of emphasis and reliance on identity as belonging to a certain type of practice style. For example, being a Zen Buddhist. I loved to be Zen Buddhist back in the day. I didn't want to hear of anything else. So I've been through it. Okay. But anyway, my point is that being a Zen Buddhist or being a Kagyu Tibetan Buddhist and not other type of Tibetan Buddhist and so on. But back then it wasn't as black and white, as rigid, and bindis were worn universally by practitioners. And this is why I feel that bindi is like a, even though it associates in the minds of modern people, including many of us, it firstly gets associated with Hindu culture. It really, historically, based on historical facts, it's a universal sign. And that's why I chose it as an external mark, that all our Sangha members are free to wear or not to wear. But having said that, I just made a strong case of being on display. Maybe, surround people around us think that, oh, that's some kind of a weirdo. Oh, that's a white person or white person wearing something oriental, dodgy. Doesn't matter. There are always people have prejudices and make judgments. But there might be some who, because of noticing that bindi, noticing the mala around your neck, if you're an ordained member, noticing your robe, might just have that moment like Shakyamuni saw that yogi. That your energy that you have developed through your practice might be recognized. How likely it is that it will be recognized without you having an exclamation mark in your forehead. Right? I remember the story I told this in the Sangha some time ago about Harada Roshi, in whose monastery I lived and studied. His story about meeting his Zen master, Yamada Mumon, Yamada Roshi. I'll tell you the story again. So young Harada Roshi, he was just 15 years old or 16, somewhere around there. And one day he was taking a bus to home from high school or university. And he was sitting there in the bus when all of a sudden the bus was boarded by this, like a senior monk. I guess Yamada Roshi already had a bit gray hair and perhaps a bit gray beard. He used to have a beard. And so he boarded the bus and walked past or walked next to young Harada, and Harada Roshi, the young teenager, was stunned by his energy. Whoa. Like stunned, shocked in a positive way. And he didn't dare to, which is kind of a Japanese custom. He didn't dare to go and say, hello, hello, who are you? Like, you have amazing energy. Who are you? You know, he didn't do that, but he didn't leave the bus on the stop and go his home, but he followed the monk and found out where he was going. And he went to, this monk went to his own temple. And that's how he eventually found out that it was Yamada Roshi. And then I think young Harada already became his student during university days. But immediately after he graduated university, he went to Yamada Mumon's monastery and started training under him. And he trained with him for 20 years, became a Zen master himself. And, you know, Harada Roshi has been very influential in the world, not only in the Zen world, but he has trained hundreds and hundreds of mostly Westerners in his temple in Japan. But how did it all start again? It was that Yamada Mumon, who was wearing bright Zen master's robes. I think it was the robes that caught young Harada's attention. And then he was able to pick up his energy. If Mumon Roshi had been in same casual clothing, let's say wearing straight pants and like a, small jacket, business jacket, and a tie, like everybody else in the bus, would he have noticed Mumon at all? Maybe young Harada would have, obviously he had a really ripe karma to become a full-time practitioner and then later to become a master, Zen master himself. But if Mumon Roshi had been wearing casual clothes, then the young Harada might have not found the teacher who was perfect for him that day. Maybe he would have been fortunate to find him 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, and perhaps study with others before that. But these things matter. That's what I'm trying to say. They matter a lot. How much really do these things matter? These little bindis on our foreheads, malas in the neck, robes. History tells us that this can change the lives of countless people of samsara. And that's a lot. I guess I've made myself clear by now regarding this point. But then 2 nights ago, in the evening, I was lying in my bed again thinking about this. And I suddenly had the idea of starting this project that would openly discuss about this matter, explain the history, give examples, and then encourage people, whether they practice secular mindfulness, whether they practice transcendental meditation, whether they practice this type of practice or whatever type of meditation practice. The project would be about encouraging individuals and groups sometimes go and practice on display, on streets, marketplaces, parks, where people can see them. Isn't that a brilliant idea? Yeah. Of course, I will start collecting membership fees and, keep a register of groups that are authorized to do this. I have learned something over the 15 years that I've been doing this. All right, let's sit for a moment and then take a break.